Ladies and gentlemen, coming to you live from beautiful Wichita Falls, Texas, the most important podcast in the world. This is Late Stage Internet Radio with your host, Chris Mehmet, and temporary guest host, Alex. Chris, how are you doing this morning?
I'm doing well. I'm caffeinated as opposed to on the brink of falling asleep during our usual recording time, so that's always a good thing. It's a nice rainy Saturday here in New England, where we've had a drought for like 6 weeks and like fires throughout the state. So, rain is good. Things are doing well. It finally feels a little cold, so the hot coffee is like hitting different. Having a good morning. How are you doing?
Dude, I'm good. I've been up for about an hour. Every time before we do this show, I play the Muppet Show theme song in my head. I don't actually play it. And it goes, "It's time to play the music. It's time to light." I grew up with the Muppet Show because my grandparents had it all on DVD. So I watched a lot of the Muppet Show from the 1970s growing up.
That's really, I'm jealous. I watched less cool television.
I thought it was just like a cultural touchstone for everyone, that everyone just watched the Muppet Show, but I've realized in adult life that that's not true.
Yeah. I'm familiar with the Muppets. I watched Muppet Treasure Island over and over and over again, but I cannot say I watched the Muppet Show itself.
See, I've seen a couple of the Muppet movies like once. I've seen Muppet Treasure Island once, but like most people are more familiar with. Yeah, great movie.
Incredible. I love that movie.
What a concept, dude. The 70s were awesome. Everyone was doing a lot of drugs. They were like, what if we put a bunch of what if we did a television show? They were like, what if we made the Adam Friedland show, but we did it with puppets? I would watch that. I would watch that. Yeah, basically. Yeah.
I'm surprised the Adam Friedland show hasn't given that a try.
Hasn't had more puppets in it?
Well, just like the monologue, but Adam's a puppet.
But Adam's a puppet? Yeah. Nick, if you're watching this.
I think Nick's all different Nick personalities as different puppets would be.
It's different. Dude, that's a great idea.
Would be pretty cool, too.
We're giving better podcasts than us some really good ideas.
Yeah.
Ugh, okay.
Subscribe to the Patreon.
Subscribe to our Patreon.
Give us money.
Please, God, please give us money. God, what's been going on? Oh, apparently Dr. Oz has been nominated for something, which is why I made up your last name as
Mr. Mehmet.
Chris Mehmet.
He's in charge of like Medicare and Medicaid. That's about all I know.
God, we're so cooked. I love that Trump's cabinet is just like dudes he knows.
What kind of medicine did he practice?
Dude, that's a good question. I was too
in my
busy
head,
watching.
He was just like a TV personality that was never actually a doctor, but that's probably not true.
I think he is actually a doctor. Yeah, okay. He is a physician. He is a cardiothoracic surgeon. He is a professor emeritus of cardiothoracic surgery at Columbia. Dude, okay, so he's a smart guy, which actually makes all his like bullshit scamming about like green coffee beans and such like way worse. Say what you will about modern influencers, but like I really think a lot of them are dumb enough that they think that eating only meat or whatever and bone marrow and stuff is like they actually think that it's gonna make you live forever.
Mm-hmm.
But Dr. Oz knows better, and he bullshits boomers anyway.
Yeah, but he's got a lot of money, so he can lie to make more money.
Mm-hmm. He can lie.
Once you make enough money, you realize that if you just get comfortable with a little bit of lying, a little bit of fibbing, you can make even more money, and so life gets better.
Life gets so much better. That's how I lived my whole career. And then you can use the Fox News defense, which is like no reasonable person would take this as like serious political news or commentary, and that this is like only for entertainment.
Yeah, combine it with Mr. Rubin and say like, I'm just exploring new ideas.
I'm just exploring
ideas. By exploring new crazy ideas. Like you've got to try them out, try them on for size, give them a go. Yeah, roll with them, see what happens.
Yeah, you got to boof green coffee beans, and I don't know. Maybe it will make you lose weight. Maybe it won't. It's worth a shot.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Or you could just eat another apple instead of Jolly Rancher. I don't know why that's the first candy to come to my mind.
Yeah, dude. Jolly Ranchers aren't even that caloric. I don't know.
Yeah, no,
Terrible,
that was a
terrible
bad
candy,
example.
by the way.
Honestly, an apple might have more. It probably has more calories than a singular Jolly Rancher.
Yeah, but it won't make you feel terrible about yours. I hate Jolly Ranchers, dude.
Yeah,
I genuinely hate them.
Yeah, if your body is older than that of like a fifth grader, like you can't physically handle them anymore. Like that's about when you max out at being able to just eat them and keep going with your day. Like if I had a couple of them now after French class or whatever, I would be toast for the rest of the day.
Your French class.
I always remember getting them in French class. I don't know why.
Yeah, they're always used as like a reward for. They were in my elementary school. I guess because they keep forever and no one's allergic to anything in them because they're pure sugar and RD40.
Yeah. That's probably why. Yeah, you know why? In French class, it was like if you remembered enough vocab words, you get
a Jolly Rancher. Yeah, that seems about right.
It's a little bit of cheating from the teacher's perspective, but
yeah, and I never liked them. But I would occasionally have them anyway, and I think all that RD40 probably made me trans or whatever. Not that I am, but if I were, that would be why.
If you were.
If I were.
How many instances across the country do you think there've been in recent years of parents getting mad at teachers for giving their kids Jolly Ranchers because they want their kids on a keto diet?
Oh God, that's a depressing question. That right there is the RFK support base. That's now the Trump support base. I'm going to say there's been more of those than there have been transgender surgeries on minors. I think that's going to be my my number there.
Yeah, I don't think you're wrong. I mean, if you broaden it to not exclusively keto, but just to like
for health stuff,
like conservative parents being like, you're gonna like poison my kids. Yeah,
I think even the keto thing, which by the way, this is the real like the number of because the right makes such a big deal about this. I feel like I expressed my views on the trans stuff poorly last episode. I listened to it last night while I was going for a run. Listen to myself yap.
Well run, that's incredible.
Yeah. Well, it was an easy run, so it's okay. But the right makes such a big deal about the trans surgery thing, and I think there's like a few dozen a year on kids. It's just in a country of like 350 million people or something, 330 million.
Yeah.
But I guess the counter argument is like even one is too much, which seems ridiculous to me. But yeah, whatever. I'm going to say there's probably hundreds of parents who have complained about their kids not following the keto diet because of Jolly Ranchers.
Yeah. Now, how many of them have made the permanent decision to homeschool their kids because of bad food they're being served in public schools?
Dude, probably thousands. And I think all of those people also probably oppose the Michelle Obama let's make healthier school lunches thing is like the great irony of this like whole situation.
Government intervention.
Yeah, that's government intervention. But when RFK does it,
let the free market get into schools, get into school lunches.
Yeah.
If you let Burger King and McDonald's compete.
McDonald's. Yeah,
as vendors for school lunches.
That's the real. Yeah, well, as long as McDonald's stops using seed oils, then it's going to be like healthy again.
Then it's going to be all healthy again.
Again, like it was in the 50s.
Yes,
peak health.
Yeah, like it was in like the 70s. I feel like McDonald's in like the 70s slapped. Like there was less like knowing that it was like a step unhealthier above everything else. You just went and ate some McDonald's.
Just wanted to eat it. It probably like genuinely was better. I think that the fries not being fried in beef tallow, I'm not convinced it has absolutely any effect on health, but you can't tell me that doesn't taste better than canola oil. Like there's no way. Oh my god. Um,
Yeah.
yeah. Do you remember that movie?
Yeah.
Yeah. Do you remember that movie Super Size Me, the documentary?
Yeah.
Rather.
Yeah. I watched that. I watched it at home. Actually, I was. It might have been the first film I ever watched on Netflix's streaming platform. Um, this was back in like the original when Netflix became a streaming platform. They didn't have rights to anything, so it was all like indie films that they negotiated with to get on their platform, and that was like my brother and sister and I wanted to find like a fun movie to watch, and that was the closest thing we could find was Super Size Me.
Hmm.
So yeah,
was
thank you,
that
Netflix.
before or after House of Cards? Because I feel like House of Cards was like the streaming service inflection point. And no one remembers it or gives it any credit because it turns out Kevin Spacey's a fucking horrible person, pedophile. But
Yeah. No, I feel like House of Cards started on Netflix in what, like 2015 or something, 2016?
I think it was like 2014. Yeah.
Yeah, so this
pretty.
would have been like, I don't know, 2010 or something.
Oh, okay. Okay.
It was
Jesus.
literally like
Yeah.
the first, I don't know when it was, but it was like whenever Netflix like first launched its streaming. Because we had
Yeah.
been on the once a month new movie disc thing.
Mhm.
And then we signed, I don't know, my mom must have signed up for the streaming whenever they first offered it. It was literally like the first
Wow.
version of
You
Netflix
guys were
streaming.
early adopters. Yeah.
Yes, we were.
I
We
don't
were really
even.
on it.
Dude, I wasn't even really allowed to watch TV growing up. I was allowed to watch PBS, and I think I got like a half hour or at max an hour a day.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and then at some point, I discovered the internet, and then things started to break down. And
Yeah.
then, yeah.
Maybe if we'd just been allowed to, me too, I wasn't allowed to watch a ton of TV. And if I was, it had to be, yeah, like PBS or like Nick Jr., like no way I could watch
Mhm.
Nickelodeon or Cartoon Network or anything. Maybe if we'd just been allowed to, we would have like dopamined our brain out of like boring, just like kind of like shitty, addicting content at a young age and like not been into the internet. Probably not true,
Yeah,
but
I was going to ask, like, would we be better socially adjusted if we had been
yeah.
able to watch, if we had been able to watch like normal TV as a kid growing up?
Maybe we could have made some more friends because we could have talked about the shows that like literally every other kid was watching
Yeah.
and not
Well,
Franklin.
once my brothers started growing up, then my parents loosened the restrictions,
Loosened the reins.
which is like I remember when I was 11 or 12, it was a struggle. I wanted to get Halo Combat Evolved for the personal computer because I didn't have an Xbox.
Mm-hmm.
And it was that was a struggle to let my parents or for my parents to let me play that. And eventually they broke because you only kill aliens and zombies in that game. And dude, that game was fucking awesome. In the PC version, you could mod it and stuff, and that's how I that's how I learned what computer file structures were. Yeah,
Very
God,
important.
good, genuinely very important. Yeah,
Yeah,
good times.
that's based. Did your parents were they restrictive at all with the music you listened to?
I didn't listen to much music growing up, but no, like my dad liked listening to a lot of Green Day growing up with my
My
dad.
mom, I have this memory of her going into iTunes and just deleting like 75% of my songs because they talked about like mature topics, but like what pop
Oh,
song
really?
doesn't talk about like the one I remember distinctly was her deleting Hot and Cold. Is that what it's called from Katy Perry?
Mm-hmm.
Um
Does
because
that
it was
song have
talking about
mature
periods.
topics?
She was
Oh,
like it's
what?
talking about periods.
Periods. But wait, how
You're
old were
hot and
you?
you're cold, you're yes and you're no or something. I don't whatever the lyrics are. I don't even know if that's what it's actually about.
I don't think it's. I think it's about a situationship with a guy who's non-committal.
Yeah, that's probably much more right. But I remember her interpretation of reading the lyrics is like there's like period. I also, as like a middle schooler at the time, like could very well be remembering the song / confusing it with another song, but that's the way my memory goes. But yeah, a lot of the music I liked that was like pop music at the time, like a lot of Green Day got deleted if there were swears in it, if it was explicit. which I'm sure I would have to imagine my mom looks back and is like, oh, okay, yeah, that was probably a little
Yeah, it
overparenting.
was a bit much. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then my youngest brother, who's 5 years younger than me, got to play Grand Theft Auto and watch like The Simpsons when he was 10. What the fuck?
Yeah,
Bullshit. But
God
that's
damn it.
parenting, you know?
Yeah. Yeah, I think my sister would have been my youngest sister would well, my only sister. My younger sister would have been allowed to watch anything she wanted, I think, but she didn't even want to watch the like edgy stuff. She watched like horse shows and animated stuff. And she's just like she is a high schooler, like her go-to movies were still like High School Musical and stuff, which I enjoy some of that stuff if I'm being completely honest. Some of the like really cheesy Disney stuff, it's fun, but yeah, she didn't
Are
even
you
get
a
to take advantage.
are you a musical? Are you a fan of musicals?
When I watch them, I am, but I'm not
Right.
like going out of my way to. I've never on my own chosen a musical to view, but when they're on, I will sit down and very much enjoy them.
Okay. Interesting. Very
Yeah.
much. I guess you are a music guy, so I guess that's not super. What do you think of the musical composition of like musical numbers?
I like it because there's a fair amount of like pop structure, but it uses some more interesting harmony. Um, and so for me, it's my sort of way of being like a music theory edgelord and being like, actually, pop music is like all the same four chord progression. It's really dumb and boring and stupid. So, but I kind of like pop music, and I kind of like don't want to like admit it because like there's certain versions of it that I really like.
Yeah.
So it like counteracts my like music theory nerd, like I'm better than everyone else thing. But musicals can do some pretty cool theory stuff that I like. And there's very interesting. Stop using music theory words. This is the last one I use.
Go into it. You can say it as long as you roughly define it after.
There's some interesting counterpoint with counterpoint is like two competing, not actually competing. They're meant to work together, but it's two melodies that are working together. With the vocals and musical stuff, like particularly when you've like the obvious example would be like if you've got like a male love interest, female love interest, and they're singing like a love song, and they're like the male sings and the female sings, they go back and forth, and then they sing on top of each other. But instead of singing in unison or in just sort of like in harmony, in the way that a lot of pop music does, where like maybe the female's singing like a fifth or a sixth above the male the whole time. There's interesting counterpoint where they've got their own melody that's like playing with each other, and it's something that it exists in pop music, but it's not as common, I don't think. Maybe pop music stands would get really mad at me because I'm sure there's tons of examples of it, but I like the way it's done in musicals because it sticks to a lot of like old school like harmonic and theory stuff that I am a nerd and sucker for. I love a lot of old school music theory stuff. So anyways, I like them. They're fun.
All right. Chris pro musical. When I was a kid, my mom really likes musicals. So when I was a stupid edgelord, I just decided that I didn't like musicals when I was like 12.
I have forever thought I didn't like them, but then I watched. I would say publicly I hate them. And if someone wanted to watch one, I'd be like, come on, no.
Come on.
But then we like 10 minutes in, and I'm kind of like really into it.
Yeah, they do have a way of sweeping you into them. There's one musical that, of course, I do like, which is Les Mis, because it's.
Do you like Les Mis? Yeah.
Yeah, I do like Les Mis because
it kind of makes a lot of sense why you would like.
Well,
Les Mis.
I mean, it's about the failure of a revolutionary movement when the students fail to form a real vanguard party and integrate with the masses. So it's actually Les Mis is actually a sort of a Maoist musical in a sense, because it's about the failure of the I'm mostly kidding, but of course they wouldn't know that. Yeah, because it was 1848 and theory was not as advanced as Marx, Lenin, and Mao.
Had Marx
eventually
done any Had he released anything yet? When did he first start publishing? In like the 30s? No, it wouldn't be that early, would it?
No. He wrote the philosophic and economic manuscripts in that was 1844, but those weren't discovered until like 1930. So not that. Well, I guess his doctoral dissertation would have been published.
Mm-hmm.
But the Communist Manifesto was 1848, right?
Yeah,
So,
that sounds about right.
yeah.
You know
Not
what'd
that
be
it
really
matters.
cool is if Bryan Johnson's like Live Forever project was given to Marx. Like, I would love for Marx to still be alive and listen to that man go on podcasts.
I think he would kill
That would be
himself.
very
I don't know. I
fascinating.
don't know.
Well, yes, no,
I'm sure he
probably.
would critique it. Yeah.
But just to hear, yeah, I think he would have some cool things to say.
What does
But
this
his
say
brain
about-
he might have used all the brain power that a human being can physically use in one lifetime in the time that he was alive, and he might at this point just be like playing video games and smoking weed.
I don't think brain power. I hope brain power is not a finite resource. Not that it matters because I'm out
Not
anyway.
literally, but like
Yeah.
at a certain point you just burn out. Maybe
Yeah.
not.
Or not.
I don't know. Noam
Or
Chomsky has
not.
not burned out.
I
That man's
think
been doing it for a hot minute.
I think it's more like a muscle, where it's a use it or lose it physical capacity.
Yeah.
And the more you use it, the stronger it stays. And there probably are some like physical limits. Like if you're like a really good runner throughout your teens, your 20s, your 30s, and your 40s, by the time you get to your 50s, you're slowing down a little bit, but you still have a massive VO2 max. And you see guys who are in their 70s run marathons and probably run marathons faster than I can. And I think it's similar with like an intellectual thing. But actually, the intellect is different because you also get wiser the more you age. So even if the neurons are degenerating, you have more experience. So yeah.
Yeah, there definitely seems to be. I mean, you can listen to. I mean, outside of academics who have like a stroke or like some actual just sort of like genetic or whatever, not even necessarily genetic, but just some sort of like much more very interruptive aging thing. But there's a lot of like Noam Chomsky's of the world who just like keep thinking and they just don't stop and it keeps working, which is cool. I am like as confident as I am about anything that Destiny is going to be like going on podcasts at age 94.
Oh God, I hope not. Oh man, I don't know if the world can deal with another fucking 60 years of Stephen Bonnell II.
I think he's going to be like. I think he is. At a certain point, we're going to have to all just accept that he is like a very serious intellectual.
Very serious intellectual.
Very serious. If he just if in his time on the internet, he had always had a really tight haircut and always wore suits on stream, what would we think of him as?
Well, I mean, the big dunks against him are the big honest dunks is like he doesn't have a degree in anything.
Yeah. But he's the first one. He's like changing that. He's really like, because he can. I don't know. I'm not saying I agree with him on everything, but he can. There aren't many conversations I've seen him in where he's clearly like intellectually outmatched. Do you disagree with that?
I'm trying to think, because first of all, the thing about online debate, like I watch a lot of that bullshit because I'm terminally brain rotted, and I like the intellectual combat. So most of his more serious discussions, I probably haven't watched. Like I've been meaning to watch the Destiny Richard Wolff thing for a while because I agree more with Wolff, but I have a sneaking suspicion that Destiny is more used to the medium of online fucking debate, so he probably comes off better. No, I mean, I find Destiny incredibly abrasive and occasionally annoying and sometimes funny, and ultimately like I'm further left than he is on basically everything. But I also think it's important to have someone give an impassioned defense of liberalism in like a genuine way. just for the sake of maintaining I don't know, some kind of normal balance. I don't know. Twitter fucking hates him, which is fine. Like most leftists fucking hate him, which is fine. I understand, but yeah. I do think he's a reasonably intelligent dude, to be clear.
I think he's like a very intelligent dude, and I think that if he got seriously involved and deep dived into like any of these topics, like he could keep up with all of that. I think the process with which he goes about trying to think things through is genuinely on a different level than most internet people.
And most internet personalities?
Self-reflection, and like, you can say that he's doing it wrong or whatever. I promise I'm not here to like defend Destiny till the end of time. But there aren't many internet people who are going through the process of like trying to like just follow argument, opening up documents, like trying to like go through it, and are not just relying on like general feelings / like what is the popular argument of my in-group right now.
Yeah. What are the vibes?
Yeah. And I think that there's a level of intellectual rigor there that is what is taught in many ways in more formal like intellectual training that he's trying to at least engage with. And so when he engages with like someone who knows what they're talking about on the left, and the person on the left is not trying to just like
pull one over.
Yeah, like look at this Nazi, look at this dumb guy who's posing as like a liberal or whatever, but he's actually a Nazi type debate, and that's like the vibe. Then the conversation, like Destiny's not. There aren't like terms. There's not ways of thinking about things that he's not keeping up with. So, anyways, there are lots of there are people who we would consider to be like intellectual giants who are very conservative in nature, who we would probably dislike much more than Destiny. And I think if he keeps doing this in terms of like connecting media, new media, alternative media with old school sort of academic institutional ways of pumping out experts on thinking, I think he's going to be one of the people that we see as really bridging that gap.
Yeah, hopefully his previous 10 years of streaming and saying edgy shit don't totally sink him, but we'll see. I think what I have like actually really liked of his output, and I guess his co-host's output, is the Bridges podcast, which I guess started to build a bridge between, kind of like center left Dems and conservatives, but seems to have pivoted into talking to a lot of like socialist or socialist adjacent people. That I think is the real kind of bridge to be built between centrist Dems and like people who are progressive to socialist to actually communist, because I think there are some shared interests and shared values there. And if you understand communism as kind of like like going through fulfilling the promises of liberalism that are made impossible through the values of liberalism, then actually conversations like that can make a whole lot more sense, versus it feels like the right is, it's kind of purely reactionary people just fermenting their own fascistic personality traits. So yeah, I know you watched the Joshua Citarella episode of the Bridges podcast. What did you think?
I've still got like 45 minutes left. It's a long pod. But my takeaway from that was really that if Destiny spends more time engaging with leftists and socialists and communists who have done the reading, per se, and are actually humble in their intellect and are not looking to win debate points, which obviously Destiny is not like innocent of having engaged in a lot of those things himself. You watch one debate with him where he likes to try and dunk on people. He's not innocent of it. But there is so much maybe not on the broader sort of like, what do we do to fix problems worldview, but there's a lot of room for some pretty interesting discussion. And I think I'm at a point now where the things have shifted to such a like normalized like center right just world, like that is just like the center right sort of, if you think of if you're willing, would you agree that neoliberalism can be described in the political spectrum as like the center right position? Does that seem right?
In which political? Yeah, I would say
If you're
broadly
just
yes.
all
I
the
think
big, I know
all
it's
the
hard
big
to
ideas.
do.
Yeah, I think
The
of all
big
the big
ideas.
ideas, neoliberalism is basically center right in terms of
Yeah.
like basically I think what we're referring to there is the spectrum of kind of 20th through 21st century like political thought. If we just line them all up from left to right, I would say it's probably about center right. Yeah.
Yeah. And so I think that in terms of improving quality of life for just a lot of people, if and I mean, what's curious is that where would you, because Destiny's not, he would very much describe himself as a liberal, right? But would he describe himself as does anyone really describe themselves as neoliberal? Like, not really. It's usually
I think
used as a
there's some
derogatory
people
term.
like on
Actually, Ezra
Reddit who
Klein
do.
I think Ezra Klein likes to describe himself as neoliberal.
Neoliberal is a difficult term in terms of. I mean, I'm sure there's academic work we could defer to in terms of like a firm definition, but colloquially on the internet, like what it actually means, because kind of like if you play out some of the premises of neoliberalism, it's not entirely like, for example, like Fukuyama, Francis Fukuyama in fucking End of History, I think refers to one of the Nordic social democracies as being neoliberal. Obviously, that book is written 35
he
years
refers
ago.
to Denmark. That's what Citarella referenced that in that interview. He references Denmark. Yeah.
And it's sort of in some sense it is, right? Because there's this like ultimate deference to markets as something that can allocate things optimally. But you can have that, and you can also recognize that, like, okay, well, markets can fail in the same way that any institution can have failings, and kind of seek to like rebalance those gains. And that doesn't seem entirely contradictory with the premises of neoliberalism, but it does seem contradictory with how most neoliberals would identify and kind of like the vibes they're going for. So I would call that basically like, I don't know, we can colloquially call it like progressive liberalism, and understanding that capitalism is basically good, markets are good, and we can rebalance the gains that we get societally in a way that leads to more optimal outcomes. And I think that to me seems like where like Destiny would land. And honestly, like most of the modern, well, a lot of Dems probably are a little bit right of that, but I think is kind of like the mainstream left position in the U.S. now, or mainstream Dem position.
Yeah. Well, one of the things that Destiny said in that podcast, and that I've heard him say before, where he would very much align with like you and me, I think. I won't speak for you, but he would align with me. Is that he says it's important for people when understanding the world to. Oh, did I lose you?
Keep going. My audio's on. I just had to reboot my camera.
Okay. It's important for people when sort of looking at the world around them and looking at corporations and the way the world works and whatnot to understand that companies do not exist as like moral entities. Like there's no like corporations aren't out there to do good or to do bad. They are out there fundamentally as like profit seeking organizations. Like that is the underlying thing. And so people need to understand that in terms of like looking at the world around them and looking at companies and understanding that the market system of just like sort of solving human need, like it's not like companies pop up to meet a need and that's the primary force that's popping it up. Like that can be that meeting human need can be something which can be profit making, but there are certain There are
Yes.
certain markets which like really meet human need pretty well, pretty darn well, certainly better than anything in human history. And just in terms of like how much clothes are being made. I mean, I know there's lots of problems like with production and how workers are treated and
But in
everything.
terms of like actually
In
developing
terms of
like our
like
ability to
output,
make stuff, yeah, I mean,
yeah, like
like
there's never been a time in history that we've made nearly as much clothing.
yeah, sheer, in
Um,
terms of sheer output, I mean,
yeah,
Marx recognized this is like capitalism is really good at at making stuff.
yeah.
Yeah.
But then like someone like Destiny used in the example in the podcast, he says like when we look at like sort of more rare diseases that need very specialized treatment, like markets are not going to be a great solution for that because there's not as much demand. There, you know, for people with rare diseases, but we probably would all agree that like of course we should be spending a lot of resources on things like cancer and heart disease and other stuff, but probably some overlap between different diseases and understanding. The more you understand cancer, the more you can understand some other diseases and whatever. And so there's no world in which we shouldn't be looking for solutions for anyways. So, but the point, what's interesting to me is that I think that like wherever Destiny is on the political spectrum and everyone to the left of him, maybe not everyone, but a lot of people to the left of him, there's enough common ground, at least right now, that I think finding a way to even if it's very transactional, like transactionally work together to gain political power, like can make some things a lot better. And not get necessarily where we want to go, but in terms of getting a little bit more into like SOCDEM territory.
Yeah.
There's political power that needs to be gained only by those factions working together on some level.
Yeah, I think so. And I think a lot of like far left people on kind of like Twitter and stuff will shit on like the DSA for piggybacking on the Dems. And I think there's this memory of like the German Revolution specifically, where it's like the ostensibly the like as they were social democrats, like ultimately backstabbed the communists. And so they're like, see, this is why you never collaborate with these people. And it's like, okay, well, guess what? The political conditions in modern day America are very different. Like we don't have a robust communist or even social democratic party. And so it makes sense to kind of like glom onto something that's bigger, that does have some shared goals, and I think probably some reasonable room for these positions to kind of like grab onto that, ride it a little bit, and take advantage of shared political interests. I mean, that's just kind of like good politics. So,
yeah. Well, what do you think the? I mean, I'm curious about what do you think the space is for, like, as more and more podcasts keep cropping up, and I'm targeting this sort of at the two of us, but also just more generally speaking, like, what is the role in all of this? Slash, is this like an effective? Is this where we're heading? Like, where everything is just going to be podcast debate? Like, I don't know. In the world of thinking about these like you can get just more and more niche and more specific. There's just a podcast to fill like every void. Are we in danger of like getting in the way of like political action by there just being more and more podcasts?
My gut reaction is to say, yeah, probably. So maybe we should hang it up and just stop. And kind of like ultimately like the function of this media is for people both who make it and consume it to be like, oh, we're doing something by like we're doing something by it's peak liberalism. We're doing something just by talking about the ideas. Like, no, you're not doing anything. We're just talking. First of all, I'm doing this because I like to hear myself yap, and I like to hear you yap. But I'm under no illusion that this is in any way like politically meaningful. I just like doing it because it's fun. But I think that I mean, you're really making a critique of like media more broadly. where it's like you get the good feels that you would get from political participation if you watch like a somewhat politically progressive piece of media where you're like, well, that was so based.
Mm-hmm.
Fuck, I can't remember the term for this. I'm 90% sure it's in the first like 20 pages of Capitalist Realism.
Mm-hmm.
But it's basically, it's kind of like the using the good feelings that you get from consuming media that's like progressive in nature to supplant actual political action.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. But I think what I'll say is that, we're also not helping anything by like, if the two of us like cold turkeyed the internet, like,
Yeah, it
yeah,
doesn't
maybe
help
some
either. Yeah.
people are gonna follow us and hop off the bandwagon, but the amount of money that's being spent on making social media as addicting as possible, like we're not going to
Mhm.
create a mass movement of people in the current political landscape, in the current like world landscape. We're not going to get a mass movement of people to like quit the internet and like go back to spending their free time at the public square, whatever that actually is.
Mhm.
If there is such a thing anymore. We're not going to convince enough people to just cold turkey it. It's
Yeah.
this, yeah. So
Well,
I don't think that you actually gain anything either by trying to like hop off the internet and saying like, look at me, everyone. But
mhm.
like, look at to who? Who are you? Because you can't speak to anyone anymore because anyone who's interested in anything is engaged in the internet. So we might just be like, I think we can maybe recognize that there's a lot of problems here and a lot that's going to play out in ways that we don't know. But I'm at a point where I'm also just like, there's nothing I can do to stop it. So let's just roll with it and try and turn it into
we
the
just
best
have to
outcome
we
that
just
we
have to
can,
you have to go through
which is
it. Yeah. There's no
admittedly
going
like
back.
some self-cope. But it's interesting to me too, because it also seems like the incentive structure, it's where sort of capitalist incentive structure ekes its way into everything, where if you're like if someone gets introduced to Marx or socialism or any sort of leftist anything, the incentive structure right now is such that like it's almost more not almost, I would say it's clearly more appealing to meet human psychological need to look at someone like Hasan and say, um, if I can just get to the point where I'm talking about socialism full time and making a bunch of money, then like look at all the time I'll have to spread the message and I'll be doing so much good. But it's like really kind of what we're all like, we want money and freedom for ourselves. And like we're all just working towards getting there. And it's not actually like, do you know what I mean? Like it's just like a
Well, yeah, I mean, of course, like no one is immune to the incentive structures in a system that, like, if I materially checked out tomorrow, if I was like, I don't care about money, I'd be fucked.
mhm, yeah.
Actually, I specifically probably wouldn't be fucked. I'd probably just be a loser who lives in my parents' basement forever.
Mhm.
Um, but I specifically wouldn't die. But I mean, the
Oh, I
reality
totally would.
is that like a lot of people would, and those who wouldn't die would be in just fucking awful situations. So you can't blame people for that.
No,
I'll
I'm
sort
not.
of
It's not a blame. Yeah. But
no,
anyways,
yeah,
go ahead.
sorry,
Go
no,
ahead.
blame is the wrong word, but um, it makes sense rather that people would follow that incentive structure.
Mhm.
Um, I think what is, again, the problematic part is to think that you're doing something that you're not actually doing. Um, and to think that this somehow replaces like any kind of genuine political action, um, which it doesn't. But I don't know that the goal for everyone. The goal for me is certainly not to be able to do this full time and talk about socialism and communism and Marx all the time. Um, that's not my goal here. But
What do you let's imagine the podcast blew up and we made enough money on Patreon and ads or whatever to make
mhm.
a full-time income. Are you still working another job? Is that your
That's a good question. I have some life stuff going on that might mean maybe. Um,
Mhm.
and I don't I don't know. Part of me is genuinely scared of full-time online content because I feel like it makes you untethered from the world in some sense. And that scares me a lot. And so part of me is like, I might keep some kind of a job. Just that didn't happen.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I'm concerned about that too.
Mm-hmm.
If we ever got to that point,
If
because I feel like
it's
so much of what drives me right now is like all my frustration at work. And if I was just in the time we weren't recording or making content, I was just like playing video games or going to the gym and just like having reasonable amounts of fun. There would be a level of intensity that I wouldn't feel anymore in terms of just like politics and engaging. It would become purely an imaginary exercise as opposed to something that affects me. So I'm nervous about that too.
Yeah. That's fair. Well, actually, you know what? Let me counter this whole argument by the whole kind of like, I think there's a leftist presupposition that like, well, what goes on the internet, like, it doesn't really matter and it's no substitute for real political action. And it's like, okay, tell that to the right, because although what goes on online is insufficient, it's not. There's a difference between insufficient and maybe. I guess it's not necessary, but it does something. And I think that the rightward drift of like young men specifically is due to right-wing people. I don't know that they did this maliciously or even intentionally, but essentially like dominating online thought spaces that young dudes tend to hang out in. So that clearly has had some kind of effect on the political disposition of, a large number of people. I don't think it's why the Dems lost the election entirely, but I do think it's actually a contributing factor. So
yeah. Well, dominating cultural spaces is important because I mean, every space is tethered to politics, particularly online, whether you like it or not. Like fitness YouTube or fitness internet, technology internet, even like art internet, like music internet. I'm just thinking of the different things that I'm like involved in, like video game internet. Like it's all there's some ways in which it's more obvious and some ways in which it's not, but it's all there are like there's no doubt that sort of like fitness internet has been infiltrated by very much, I don't even know if infiltrated is the right word because maybe it's kind of always been this way, but there's like they're much more susceptible to like
the right-wing bent.
I like lift yourself up by your own bootstraps type ways of looking at the world.
Fitness is definitely like the most fertile soil for right-wing ideology for a few reasons. Is like, first of all, I mean, you can talk about like the fascism of the body, where just it's about developing sort of like aesthetic perfection, and wanting to look like a Greek statue or something, and the pursuit of truth and beauty and all these things that you keep following this down far enough, and it's like, well, where did the beauty standard come from, and like what does it mean? Is I think that traces back to ideas that I don't know if they're exclusively right wing, but definitely exist now in right wing spaces, places, and in people. And then it's like, I think on a much more personal level, it's you kind of develop this thing where it's like, well, I got in really good shape, and I did it by just putting in the fucking effort, and so you kind of extrapolate that to other things in life, and it's like, well, maybe people can basically bootstrap themselves, and so it kind of makes sense that like fitness is right leaning.
Yeah, it is itself like an actual playing out of like, well, fat people are just lazy, or people who eat processed food are just like, are just lazy or whatever. So, and there's what's it's an interesting conversation because there's like, I would say it's not nearly as simple as that, but there is, at the end of the day, like, I don't know, there's more to it, but you can see how that's yeah. So I guess the question then becomes like, do we try and artificially like pump up these cultural spaces with like left wingers? Like it seems.
I don't know that you have to do it artificially.
Yeah.
Although I'm sympathetic to the notion. I think part of the problem, honestly, is that a lot of left-wing people are just like terrible hangs, by which I mean they're just miserable to hang out with. Like they come across as like scoldy and annoying and just like there's a sense of guilt.
Demoralizing is
demoralizing in much the same way that in like the 2000s, like peak Bill Maher, like the religious conservatives came across as annoying, scoldy, morally judgmental.
Yeah.
There's a large contingent of left-wing people, and I actually don't think it's most people who are left of center, but I think it's a very vocal minority that we've allowed to dominate our cultural spaces, that are fucking everywhere, and they're miserable to hang out with, and they give everyone who's left of center like a bad name. Yeah.
Well, it's where like I think there's such a there is an audience for it, because they're like, even in the comedy space, like there is like Come Town and what is it?
Chapo. Yeah, I mean this is the
like,
genesis of the dirtbag left, right?
Yeah. So that is the dirtbag left's sort of like goal, right? Is to, I don't know if it's their goal, but it's, anyways, go ahead. What were you going to say?
Yeah, and it feels like the dirtbag left thing kind of faded out
yes,
to some extent, and I think that was a little bit, and some of that was just because like Chapo's had some issues with one guy turning out to be a pedophile, and then one guy, yikes, and then one guy, probably the smartest guy on Chapo, who I actually really like, Matt Christman, had a stroke, so like that didn't help. Come Town was never explicitly political, but you could sort of view as like the comedic wing of the Chapo DSA types. And then I think ultimately, like materially, this all sort of amounted to the momentum was never there because the DSA doesn't feel to me like it has any super specific concrete goals. Like I think they need to pick like one thing and hyper focus on it. And I think that thing is probably healthcare, and it's that needs to be their big one only push, because I think the mistake, and this is a tactical mistake, or rather a tactical and strategic, but not a intellectual mistake, is for a lot of leftists, like every issue is a microcosm of every other issue. Like Palestine isn't just about Israel and Israel having a right-wing government and continuous conflict in the Middle East that has escalated things to a point where Israel now feels it's justified to kill fucking 40 or 50,000 Palestinians, and obviously that's horrible. But that issue is actually a microcosm of everything else. And when you see things like Queers for Palestine or whatever, I understand the sentiment there of like, we're a bunch of queer people and we think that this shit needs to fucking stop at the very least. But it is kind of like, it's comedic where it's like, actually, this is about the oppression of black and brown and trans and queer people everywhere. It's like, okay, like, yeah, you can make that argument. And actually, I'm like pretty sympathetic to that. But to a normal person, it's like, what are you talking about? Even if that normal person is like, yeah, Israel is like, is way overreaching here. And obviously, like, what's going on in Gaza needs to stop. It's like, how are you tying all this together? Like, this is sense.
Yeah.
But so my point is just like, focus on one issue that's directly applicable to American people, like right here, right now. How many Americans are in fucking medical debt? How many people like can't leave their jobs because then they wouldn't have health insurance, and then if in the time it takes them to search for a new job, they'd be cooked. Shit like that, affects everyone to some extent. So I think healthcare is your bet.
And bundled up in it are all of the different levels of like oppression and hierarchies of like problems.
Yeah.
So you don't stop yourself from talking about everything.
Right. Yeah. Exactly.
Yeah.
Because
So
like, guess who doesn't have health insurance or good health insurance? Like people who work part-time jobs who are poor. Guess who's disproportionately poor? Like black people, fucking brown, black and basically like not white people. So you can talk about that, but it all kind of like focuses on a lens, or rather through the lens of like your one specific issue, which in my mind is healthcare. But I don't know, maybe I'm fucking wrong, and that's actually not the thing to pick. But you get my point, I think.
I don't think it's bad. I mean, yeah, I think it's to use a sort of self-helpy a thing that the self-help sort of right-wing space likes to talk about a lot, but I think is applicable here. This is just the like do something principle. Like
Yes,
you can yeah, paralysis
you
by
got to do
analysis
something.
is
Yeah,
the problem.
it's a big problem for leftists in particular. And then there was
Yeah.
kind of like this emergent tension between like the more progressive elements and in the left and like in the DSA, and kind of like people like Chapo and like, Cumtown, who are saying like maybe problematic stuff, but like are ultimately like genuine and earnest in their political beliefs. And I think there's an American left wing tendency to confuse like politics for like we all have to be friends.
Yes.
And that's not true. You don't have to like people you're in a political coalition with. You have to be able to work with them. Yeah,
Yeah.
you have shared objectives. That is the important thing. They may be your friends. They probably won't be, and that's fine.
But there's way too many people who are, and I'm one of them, who are nervous about and just turned off by any sensation that their speech is being like policed in any way, that they're being told what they can and can't say. Where I think that there's a very large number of people who just would only engage in politics in a way that's sort of based around like edginess. Maybe not super large, but I think it's enough people that won't. You're not going to get them engaged. You're not going to get them in your coalition. You're not going to get them on your side by talking about like how badly certain groups of people are being treated, and if we could just come together to like make the world better for it. There's a number of people who just want like comedy in their content, and that gets at something.
Yeah, dude, and that's fine, because honestly, because people mostly don't go to content to be scolded. Some people do, and some people genuinely enjoy that. It's actually a very Christian impulse, I think. It's very much like some kind of Christian guilt, just transposed onto the political. But most people, like, you have a long day at work, you're fucking making dinner or something. Like, I'm not necessarily gonna put on like something that's, talking about like everything that I've ever done wrong, or everything that people like me have ever done wrong. Like, I'm gonna put on fucking Cumtown and laugh about some stupid bit that they're doing, and I'm gonna cook my dinner and I'm gonna enjoy myself. And I think that totally makes sense. So
Yeah, I think that yeah, I don't want to, and even forgetting the scolding for a moment, like I just don't have it in me to like constantly engage in serious talk where we can't make jokes or whatever. It's just not gonna happen. I need to be entertained too at times. But I also wonder, like, so it's very, as I've started to read Marx and just more socialist stuff and engage with it, over the past year plus. There part of it, what's interesting and very validating in a way, is to like see the ways in which it like interacts with every part of life, every part of our
Mm-hmm.
community, every part of our government. Um, but I wonder if sort of like in conversation, I wonder if it's bad strategy and bad tactics, but I'm also open to the idea that this is just like conceding a point that you don't want to concede. But I'm wondering if it's bad tactics to just like, if we lose people when we reduce everything back to capitalism bad, like every topic.
Yeah, well, at this point, it's become such a meme in like leftist circles, or like I don't know how many video essay, like bad video essays I've seen that people come back to just like, um, well, this is a problem because of capital, and they just like drop that and then kind of like keep moving. Um, and it's like, okay, like you're saying that as a shorthand, but you haven't actually. It's almost like we need a different word, or you should be referring to the specific problem that's being faced rather than just being like, I mean, ultimately, like this is what I was getting at with the everything becomes about everything, because everything is ultimately exists within capital.
Mm-hmm.
But when you say that to people, it's bad strategy because you're gesturing at something that you may understand, but they may not. And so it may be true, like everything is political, everything is connected, everything exists within, or at least defined by, the constraints of capital. But ranting about that shit is like, man, what are you fucking talking about in a very real, normal political sense? So yeah, I think you've got to point to more concrete instantiations of like what's going on instead of saying capitalism bad.
Yeah.
Which
Yeah,
capitalism bad, but also capitalism good. Both of these things are true.
Yeah. I wonder if there's like, I imagine for many people who are not super politically engaged, when if you were to show like just a random like someone who identifies as a political moderate in the United States, like one of these video essays where it's about some topic, some specific topic that people don't traditionally associate as like an economic topic, and then the thesis of the video essay is like, therefore capitalism bad. I wonder if that person responds the same way when like you and I watch that, the clip of Jordan Peterson on Rogan where Rogan asked him about climate change, and Peterson says like, well,
Climate. What do you mean?
well, the problem with climate is like, what is climate? Because like climate is everything. And like, how do you measure everything? Where it's sort of this reduction back to like, well, climate change is like a stupid thing to say. It's a non-meaningful thing. Like the left is just like making up some like word salad to try and make you feel guilty because climate is actually everything. And so like, how do you measure the change of everything? Like that's like a non, but, and so you and I might laugh at that as being sort of silly and sort of stupid, but I wonder if people react. I think a lot of people might react in a similar way when we reduce everything back to like, therefore capitalism bad as the broad statement. They're like, okay, well, you're just not, you might as well just be not saying anything. Like you're just like,
Yes.
Bad thing bad. Like, okay, thanks for wasting 20 minutes of my life.
Okay, cool. Like awesome.
Yeah.
That's awesome, man. No, I 100% agree. I think that's probably exactly what goes on in people's heads when you just do the capitalism bad thing. I'd go on a rant here about video essays because I've watched so many bad ones, and first of all, it's a mistake to assume that many of them even have a thesis. Most of them just feel like a ramble, and it's actually even worse because they'll drop that like, yeah, capitalism bad, and then they'll just keep like kind of talking about stuff. And ultimately, like there is no thesis, and it feels like just a ramble about things. But it's almost like a perfunctory, like a mandatory, like you must say capitalism bad if you're a slightly left of center YouTube personality.
Yeah, I think it's it's hard work, but I think it's a much more effective tactic for someone who, and part of this is also that it takes some legitimate hard work. But if I watch 5 video essays from someone talking about different aspects of culture and society and making like a pretty specific critique. And then I see that same person on like a podcast and they like tie them all together as like different functions of capitalism. Like it presents itself as a much more like, I get it now. Like these are all
Yeah.
related. Like there has to be some sort of organic way of building up to that point rather than
Yes.
just dropping it. Because part of what it also feels like is a little bit of it's like there's this thing that I sometimes see on the internet, and I don't know if there's a name for it, but when you drop it's on its face a very simple statement, that the implication is sort of like wink, wink to the other quote unquote very, very smart people who understand the big chain of how you
it's
arrive
dog
at it's just dog
whistling.
whistling, right? So like that's what it is. But a lot of these people are trying to do the dog whistle, but they haven't. And I'm being a
there's no
jerk here, but like
structure there.
they themselves, if you ask them to lay out the structure, they might not be able to do it. And so when it comes to like working class people, I don't want to be in the position of telling them like, well, have you done the reading in order to like engage the movement? Like, of course not. That's not what I want to do. But if you're making video essays, I think you got to be very careful and doing podcasts, either one, to like say like, these are my frustrations. These are things I see around me that like are stupid and annoy me. But if you're presenting yourself as like an intellectual laying out ideas, you need to be confident that if you had a conversation with someone you disagreed with, you could really not make yourself look like an idiot. Otherwise, it's just going to come across as like as scolding and like virtue signaling. Yeah,
I think most of these, or not, maybe most of these people, it feels like they're struggling to write an essay that's due the next day, and they need to get at least a reasonable grade for it. And I mean, I think the reason for that is that, like, if you're a moderately okay writer and you have some basic video editing software, like, there is money to be made on YouTube in video essays. And so just based off financial structure alone, it's no coincidence that a lot of left-wing voices on YouTube are just like, at least moderately intelligent 20-somethings in their bedrooms making video essays about stuff. And some of them are really good and insightful, and some of them are not, because people need to make money. And that's one avenue of doing so.
And they appeal to, I mean, there's also just so many different appeals to what makes someone on the internet interesting and a recurring watch. And sometimes it really is genuinely like the substance of what they're talking about. But it can also be like the way in which they present it comes across a certain way that it makes the viewer feel like smart, or makes the viewer feel validated, or reinforces feelings that this person already has and makes them, sometimes people want to be told, and the left is very good at this, like, hey, the world sucks, don't bother trying to engage with it. Like, some people want the validation of like, don't go
being
make
able
friends,
to check
don't
out,
go apply for a new job. Like,
be able to check out of society.
Don't
Which
pay
is
off
awful.
your student loans because Palestine, right? Like, like, don't worry about going into more debt because like the world is so effed up. Like, people, and also some people like have real, maybe I'm extrapolating this to a bigger thing than it actually is, but I think that there's a weird like sexual repression obsession thing of someone who you view as being attractive making like a political point that can really blow people up. And it's not just true with women talking about politics. There are like, I don't know. I don't want to call anyone out specifically because we're a podcast with no viewers, and that seems like a cheap attack.
No. I mean, it's not an attack on these people, but fucking name names. If you don't, I will. I will name names. They can come from me. You can say
go first. You go first.
I think like the genre of like the Noah Samsons of the world.
Yeah, he's the first one that comes to mind.
Yeah. which he is a good looking dude, but and I think ultimately, like, well, no, you can be good looking and have no substance and be pretty fucking successful.
Yeah.
But it's better if you're hot and substantive. And I think most of Noah's content is substantive enough that he, yeah, I think there's probably like a segment of like female viewers, and even not like you can be attracted to people in a non-sexual way, and I would rather watch an attractive um guy. If I were a straight guy, I would imagine being well, I don't know, I guess I'm mostly straight, but I would rather watch like an attractive person talk at me than an unattractive person talk at me.
There's also a
Call me a
way of
piece of
dealing.
shit, but
Yeah, I mean, there's a level of dealing with your own insecurities where, if you're someone who's interested in this type of content, there's like a imagining yourself as that person phenomenon going on. Where like, hey, I could do this. Like that could be
I
me.
want
I
to
could be
see
getting all this
myself in
attention.
them. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that exists. I know it exists within me. If I'm being completely honest, like I'll watch someone, I'm like, yeah, that could be me. I could be
I
some
could do that.
random guy on my
Yeah.
internet with putting on a little bit of makeup and video editing and get 400,000 subs and like be like a very niche, like no one on the streets knows who I am, but I've got like 400,000 subs. Like I could be that type of like
Yeah.
internet celebrity. Um, and then maybe
It's
I would feel like validated in all my sort of like quasi like insane like political rants that I want to give in front of the people in my life, but they'll look at me like I'm crazy. But then I'd be like, hey, no, look, I've got like hundreds of thousands of subscribers, therefore it's legit. Like I mean, social media at the end of the day is in so many ways playing on our insecurities in all different facets of it. So I don't know, but like also, there's another part of me that's like, well, if like Hassan Piker and Noah Samsen are like helping some people not go down an alt-right rabbit hole, then like, great.
yeah, I think it's useful. Yeah. I was going to make a point that there's actually a point of attractiveness that people can pass where they become too attractive and it's not attainable anymore.
Hmm.
Um, and I think Hasan is there. He's too hot. He's too
Yeah,
good looking, and it's like, all right, well, I mean,
yeah, that's not gonna be
um,
me because
yeah, it's not gonna be me.
he's pretty tall, right?
Yeah, he's like 6'4".
Yeah, and he's
Yeah,
like built like very
yeah.
big and yeah, very attractive. Like no one's gonna convince themselves that that's what they're gonna. If
Yeah,
they just gained like a bunch of followers on Twitch, that they would somehow start to look like him. Like yeah,
yeah.
okay,
No.
we all know.
In fact, the streaming lifestyle will probably make you look worse.
Yeah,
Yeah.
unless you yeah, I mean one of the things I would honest if we could make it as a podcast full time, and I made
Hmm.
enough to do this full time and I didn't have to work another job. One of the things that's incredibly high up on my list of things that I want back that I used to have in my life when we were in like college or even in high school a little bit is being able to lift weights during the middle of the day. I hate lifting first thing in the morning and I hate lifting at night. Give me like a
Dude.
3 p.m. lift or a 4 p.m. lift, and I am the happiest person in the world. But I'm just not going to consistently do it if I have to start at like 6 a.m. or 7 p.m.
Yeah, dude. I will say, as a remote worker working with a global team, so I start work usually at like 7:30, and I'm usually done by like 3:30. Um,
So
getting the
jealous.
lift in like late afternoon, good stuff. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
I'm on a 9 a.m. to 6 p.m. grind with
That's
like an
brutal.
hour
Yeah.
commute both ways. So I
Yeah,
get
because
home
then
at like
you can't
7.
you get home at 7, you have to leave at 8. So if you would want to lift in the morning, you'd have to get up at like 5, go drive somewhere.
Yeah, and I don't get home till
Yeah,
7, so good luck
right.
wolfing
So
down
yeah,
dinner, getting in the shower. It's not sustainable. So I'm doing
yeah.
some like body weight exercises at work, like in my little office space, doing some push-ups, doing some body weight squats, getting a lot of steps in, and it's obviously way better than nothing. Um,
Dude, you know what you got to get? Hold on. I gotta pull
yeah,
this
yeah,
up.
yeah.
This is not a sponsored post, by the way. Hold on.
No free ads.
No free ads, but I would do an ad for this product. This is like it's a pull-up bar, but it's not a bar. There's two of these, and it's got this very like spring mechanism, and you just clamp it around a door frame. And then
Oh, actually, yeah. Can you hit me up with a link to that? Because I would bring it to work and start doing. Because that's what I've been struggling with, is to get a back body weight exercise. I've been doing the thing. Are you familiar with this? I don't know what it's called. Where you lie on your stomach and you grab like a towel and you try and put as much tension and do like kind of like a lat pull down
it's like
type
a
motion.
Superman row thing.
Yeah. I don't know if it's effective at all in terms of like if I was trying to build muscle. I don't know if that's actually compared to a pull up, obviously it's not the same thing. But I can really feel it in my back. So it feels like I'm at least engaging the muscles. If nothing else, they're just like moving.
I think it's definitely good.
It's better than nothing because I'm also too after lifting for too long now. I'm like I will never be able to drop my obsession with like hitting all the body parts equally. I have to do it.
You have to do it. You have to get back. I feel like you do have to get like I think the back is. I remember Dave Tate always says that like the back is the engine of the power lifter, which is true because if you want to be like a strong person in general, I think having a strong back is like if you have a strong back and strong legs and kind of like mid, like everything else in terms of quote unquote functional strength, like you're good.
Yeah, you're in a good place.
Yeah,
you're in a good spot to not injure yourself picking stuff up at home or whatever.
Yeah.
Which is really what it's about. Just you can't be like effing up your knee when you're like doing laundry at home. That'll really take you out.
That's I live in constant fear. I live in constant fear of getting injured in stupid ways. Every injury I've ever got has been in pretty awesome ways. So yeah.
Oh, I don't that's a bad sign though. You're due for a dumb injury.
No, dude, I feel like I'm pretty well I got plantar fasciitis for a while after I ran a very good half marathon and it fucking destroyed me. And
that's the one in your shin?
That's the one in your foot. It's like a pain in your heel. It's very hard to describe, but it really sucks. But I'm getting over it.
That's good. Yeah, that's a pretty legit injury. I will say, as someone who's definitely had some dumb injuries, most notably severely pinching a nerve in my sleep, in my neck. Yeah, that sucks. Because you're like, you have to go and recover, and you're just like,
you just feel so stupid. You're like, this isn't even a real like because it's the nervous system. It's kind of like this is all in my head anyway. Like it's it's
not even real, but it's so real.
It's so real. Unfortunately, it's all real. Yeah.
I pinched a nerve in my back too playing golf. That one's pretty legit. Just swung a little too hard at the ball and really effed up my lower back. So yeah, it stinks. I haven't had a serious injury in a hot minute. So let's knock on wood. But hey, that would be good for podcasting. I would have no choice but to just sit down and record. But
just record all the time. Yeah.
Yeah.
What were we talking about before we started talking about working out again? Apparently,
oh, God.
There's a fitness podcast now, I guess.
I don't know.
Being a streamer, Hasan. This is. We both need to get really hot. I think that's going to be our key to success.
Yeah, I need to get a little bit back into the fashion game. I haven't bought. The last time I bought clothes for myself was probably pre-COVID. So.
Wow, dude, really?
Yeah.
It's crazy.
Yeah, I hate fashion. I despise it.
What do you hate about it?
I think that there is a lot of it costs a lot of money to have like cool clothes, and it's like the most using it as ways of like creating like hierarchies of coolness just drives me nuts.
Yeah.
Because people will always say, Like, this is, it's just me expressing myself, which is like true, of course, but um, I don't know. It's like in the gym, there's like people will perceive you, not anymore, but like back in the day, people will perceive you as being like more ripped if you just wear like Gymshark. Like, I don't know.
Mhm.
Um, I don't know. It drives me bonkers. And I'm always just like, I would rather spend my money on other stuff. Um,
Yeah, that's fair.
so,
Yeah.
so I get it that I have a little bit of like a doomer, boring, just like I wish everyone just wore blank white shirts and like jeans. Like I would just wish everyone wore that.
Yeah.
But I also like having gone to private school where there were like uniforms that were the school I went to was very loosely enforced. But there was just a niceness of just like we're all wearing the same shit.
Mhm.
And there's
Yeah,
no
because
I don't know. So
if you think of, and this is a take I'm cribbing from the menswear guy on Twitter, Derek Guy, I believe is his name. Um, Fashion is like a social language, right?
yeah.
And you can speak it more and less fluently. And to some extent, although not like, I mean, there are ways that you can thrift stuff and look for, but like also thrifting is expensive now. So, but it's a language that like you can speak it better if you have more money for one thing.
Yes.
Um, and even if that's not the case, like being able to speak it fluently takes a lot of, um, maybe not a lot, but a certain degree of time and effort. So, yeah, it's certainly not a zero cost proposition in terms of really anything.
Yeah.
That's why, yeah,
And it also, I mean, so many people use fashion and makeup and shoes and cars and all this thing as a way of dealing with like psychological problems,
yeah,
um, which I find frustrating. Um, and I know I'm probably a little bit too harsh on it, a little bit too judgmental, but I like when I hear someone say like, "Oh, I've kind of like got like a crush on this person. Like I kind of want to ask them out." Like it's like, "Oh, well, what are the things you're interested in?" It's like, "Oh, well, I really like their sense of fashion." I'm just that's what is such a you think that's going to matter when you're dating them? Like I don't know. Like I get that it's like
yeah.
a
I mean,
representation of something deeper, but it just drives me bonkers. I hate it. And I'm like
crushes definitely are irrational, but I get what you're getting at. Where it's like,
yeah, you're
why is
right.
that the thing
You're
you're
100%
latching
right.
onto? Yeah,
I don't you're just like but I also like I'm also defensive about this because it's part of my political protest with like sort of like consumerist stuff is that it is my way of giving social protest I'm just saying like I'm going to show up disheveled and I'm very sympathetic to the like Matt Binder, you know him,
I
Majority
don't
Report guy.
actually.
He like sometimes goes on the Majority Report. But he like full blown plays into the disheveled socialist look of just like screw it.
Ugh,
And I'm very trust me, I understand it's bad optics, but like just I don't know. I hate having to perform like 24/7. And fashion is a level of performance that just like you don't brush your hair when you're at home. You don't get in your maybe some people do. I don't know.
do you not feel gross if if you're not like clean and stuff? Like even if
No, I'll
I'm basically
shower, but I
home
get out of the
alone all the
shower and I'm
time.
not like brushing my hair. I'm putting on a baggy shirt and like boxers and just walking around the house. Like I'm not going to be unclean. I'm not going to not shower or not brush my teeth or whatever. But I'm certainly not like going out of my way to try and look presentable. And so the just constant like um the constant need for it it drives me a little bonkers. And I also like the particularly in workplaces, I think more than anything,
Hmm.
the way that it's used as a hierarchy of like the different positions tend to wear different clothes, and all the way down to like the lowest level of worker is forced to wear the exact same uniform. Like you guys can't have any individuality.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah,
the whole, and like the middle managers, like the way of like looking important is that you wear like a vest. It just and then the CEO is in the suit and tie, and I hate it. I hate all of it.
yeah. think my experience with that in terms of like workplace stuff is definitely unusual, or somewhat unusual. I mean, I work in tech now, so everyone kind of. Although I guess I look more alternative than the average person in tech, if you can believe it. But I guess I wear a lot of black and Doc Martens. So yeah, and yeah, everyone else is wearing Patagonia.
Yeah. So
But
is there really? I mean, tech presents itself as like the
well,
the
people
rebellion,
definitely,
but then they all dress the same. Like they're all rebellious in the same way.
well, people definitely dress in the same way, but I don't feel sharply judged for dressing slightly differently.
Okay.
Yeah, so it like I feel like people take me just as seriously as they would anyone else who's my age and my role. So
That's fine.
yeah, yeah.
Well, I work at a biotech, and so there's lots of like facilities, operations people, middle managers, directors, this, that, and the other thing, all sorts of businessy people. And then there's, of course, a bunch of actual scientists doing science. And what I love about the scientists is that these hierarchies don't exist in any way. Like you just wear whatever you want. The people doing the work wear whatever they want to work. They can show up in sweatshirts and sweatpants. I see people do that all the time. People will come, they're like doing a workout, maybe not even a workout, but they're like going to go do a workout later. So they just like, well, sometimes just wear their workout stuff. Like
roll up an athleisure. Yeah, fuck it. Why not? Yeah.
There's one guy who wears like a really, really baggy white t-shirt and sort of like ripped blue jeans every single day. But then there are also other people who like dress in sort of more standard business attire / whatever you want to call it. But to me, this is much more just like, okay, we're here to do science, and we're here to do research, and we're
on a mission.
Yeah, and I like, in the same way that when I imagine like a group of people doing an interesting creative project, like there's something that's more important than the like hierarchies. But when you get into the world of like managers and trying to move up the chain, then like the only thing that matters is not the work anymore. Like no one's doing real work. No one wants to do real work. No one cares about their work.
It's all managerial. It's all about signaling. Yeah.
It's all about signaling. And it's no different than like being in high school and just trying to move up the social chain, the social ladder. And so fashion, I think, gets used as a tool to try and move up the ladder. Like if you want to like get a promotion, people will say, well, like you got to like look the part. You got to sound like the part. You got to sound like and look like the kind of person who would get a raise. And so there's this weird incentive where I'm speaking with someone who's like on the same level as me, but they're clearly much more motivated than I am to get a promotion. So they're wearing like the vest and the like button down and the like the brown like sneaker / dress shoe combo thing. You know what I'm talking about?
Yeah. I fucking hate that. Dude, those are a travesty. I hate those so much.
Yeah. But then they're like talking to me in like capitalist lingo. And I'm like, dude, like we're just shit. Banged my headphone cord. Like we're talking about like how to fix a piece of equipment here, right? Like we're just talking about like what the problem is. And then you start throwing this language, and it gets in the way of having any sort of real conversation about like what we're actually talking about.
Yeah, we're so far we're like abstracting from the thing.
Anyways, I'm not fundamentally frustrated about the clothes, but I hate how it's a tool.
It is. It was yet another way of reinforcing social hierarchies. Or it can be. I think fashion can be more than that as well. I'm a fashion optimist. I yearn for a future where we can all use it as a mode of true individual expression. But also everyone does have to be clean. I am very, I mean, I can be understanding, obviously, if you work a fucking physical labor job, like you don't have to be clean while you're doing the job, obviously. But yeah, other than that, looking at you liberal arts kids who don't wear deodorant, that shit was gross. Sorry, go on.
Nothing hits like doing some sort of like manual labor job and getting all dirty.
Oh my god! Yes,
eating like a Chipotle burrito or just like eating something and then hopping in a shower. Like that is
Hmm.
That is the shit. That's fun stuff.
You hop in a shower, you get all clean, you go lie in bed and watch a movie.
Yeah.
Oh God,
Well,
I do miss that. Yeah.
yeah. I do have to hop off relatively soon, but I'm very curious about this distinction between, because I find it to be, and maybe I just haven't engaged with it enough. I find the socialist answer to the question of like the criticism of like, well, if we all have to share, like, are we all going to have to share each other's like toothbrushes? And then socialists will come along and say like, no, like, of course we can distinguish between things which maybe should be
Mhm.
like communally owned versus like individual property. And so that's getting into a property thing, which I don't want to necessarily get into, but
I mean, I can answer that relatively quickly if you want, but
well, sure. I'm open to hearing. I am interested in your answer, but I'm more curious about just in terms of like expression. Like, um, do you think that the socialist vision promotes, uh, like in a world where in a world where hierarchies are less extreme, does that promote individualism? Because I find myself wanting, I find myself so frustrated with these sort of like the individualist solutions that are presented to us in terms of dealing with our problems, that are really like collective problems. But then like one of my primary complaints, I put this in the notes for the last pod, we didn't talk about it, but like one of my
Mhm.
primary complaints in so many of my personal relationships is that I'm not given enough space to be like an individual. And so I don't know. I
Mhm.
just like, I'm interested in how all those things relate.
I think we should revisit the you question about not having the space to be an individual later, because I got to hop too. I've got my telehealth prostate exam, but I think the thing about, so I think we, first of all, the big sort of capitalist trick is thinking about politics in an individual rather than a communal way. Um, and sort of moralizing it and thinking about it like that. So that is a problem, and I think when um, that needs to be addressed. Conversely, like,
Hmm.
and when we talk about like individualism, I think there has to be an understanding that the individual is not separate from the world and separate from the community, and that kind of understanding that emerged out of like the idea of the liberal subject. Like there is no liberal subject. There's no atomistic you divorced from your community and your material conditions. Um, Basically, like there is no you in the abstract. Uh, so there's that. But how, in terms of like visions for the future in a socialist or better yet, a communist sense, um, I think one of the good things liberalism has brought us is individual expression, and but it constrains it. Again, this is the issue, is the promise of individual expression and the ability to be yourself counterposed with um, other ideas, and ultimately the mode of production in there that makes that fundamentally unrealizable within the constraints of liberalism. Um, So it's a twofold problem of, one, trying to understand the individual divorced from the community and the world at large is impossible. Um, and then I don't remember what my second point was. Um, but once I think, and then two, it's the promise of being able to be an individual rather than but having that constantly counterposed with um, material conditions and a constant pressure for conformity. Um,
Hmm.
yeah, does that make
So
sense?
yeah, so tell me if I'm understanding this correctly. The idea is maybe that there's sort of like a backwards law thing going on here where it's like the thesis maybe is something like you look at a community and you say the stronger the sense of like um the stronger the sense of the just the stronger the community is in terms of the way it like takes care of each other, and the more people engage with and um uh, the more that the stronger the sense of community, the stronger the sense of we, and the more we take care of each other and provide things like maybe healthcare and more free time. Like there's like a backwards law thing going on here where like that the stronger that sense of collective we, then there's more room for individual expression within it.
Yes, I think so. I think so. I think ultimately, like, kind of the idea of an individual without a community is meaningless. Otherwise, you're just like a guy on an island. Like, you don't have anything to express to. Conversely, if everyone in a community was exactly the same, kind of like, what's the point of having a community then? Community is great because it brings a bunch of different people together who, you know, are passionate about something or doing something together, and brings all of them together, and, you know, brings all their perspectives and unique strengths together, and that's what makes a community like better than an individual, is because it's more individual. So you get, you know, in a very sort of technological way of thinking about this, you get ultimately more inputs, and you can select for better inputs, and hopefully you get better outputs. So you have to have it's a dialectic between the individual and society.
So the stronger the fabric of the community, the stronger the institutions, the higher the quality of life, the less of a threat, sort of like to the system.
I think so.
People expressing themselves individually is, and the more it like actually helps things.
At the same time, there are
No, go ahead.
There are basic things that you have to agree on in order to have a stable community. But I would posit that the more stable the material conditions are, the less those disagreements become meaningful. Yeah,
well, when you imagine I think I'm exploring this as we go, so maybe this is a bad analogy, but I'm wondering like a big extended family, like the stronger and the healthier the dynamics of the family as a unit are, the more room there is for individual personalities and individuals within the family, as opposed to families that have really that are really emotionally far apart, have lots of like bad emotional ties and whatnot. There's very little room in those families for individual expression. And I think that maybe is a good way of looking at it.
I mean, I've seen that with, you know, different parts of my own family. Is there's some parts where, I think about like the most passive aggressive parts, and the ones with the most strained relationships. You could talk to someone and you go talk to someone else, and it's like no one's having a meaningful conversation, and it kind of feels like I'm talking to the same person over and over again. Even though they're different. Conversely, you know, in the parts of my family that love each other the most, it's like there's a bunch of distinct personalities coming together.
And so many different things to talk about, as opposed to, you know, you have to have the same. Like, there's groups of people in my life where it's like, okay, I see them and I'm like, I can tell you beforehand like what they're going to ask me, because there's a very set, small, limited number of available options. It's like,
you get boxed into the social script of like what's acceptable. So that nothing bad happens, because that's the fear.
Cool. Well,
all right.
It's a good place to end it.
That's a good place to end it. Thank you. I love you. Tune in next week where we talk about if dinosaurs are real.
See ya.